congratulations. Welcome to our first declaration of Interdependence Salon. We wanted to get together like we do every Thursday night at Metabolic Studio to open our practice with an opportunity to communicate with each other in a social environment. Due to quarantine, we've decided to open our Thursday night salons virtually for the foreseeable future. We also like to begin any public event with an acknowledgement for the privilege of being able to work on native lands. So it's with that intention that we're so honored to have Chairman Andy Salas and Matt Teutimez with us today from the Gabrieleño tribe. We met Matt a few months ago when we began our work bending the river back into the city in the basin of the LA River, where we started to excavate 180 feet of pipe. We cut out the concrete and revealed the floodplain. And we met Matt because he was the official cultural monitor, which is a service he does for his people to bear witness to anything that happens on their tribal lands, to make sure that anything that's found, both archaeological, ethnobotanical, ceremonial, human, or other kinds of remains are properly attended to, bared witness to, cataloged. And we began a conversation about the LA River at that time. And he was so kind to come to Metabolic Studio and share with Farm Lab, the part of our team that stewards living systems, a little bit about his knowledge about how his DNA responds to medicines gleaned from the floodplain of the LA River. But before we begin our conversation today, like he always does and like we like to do, we wanted to invite Matt and Chairman Salas to open this with a form of ritual and prayer.
Thank you so much. Our thing was muted, it wouldn't unmute. But thank you, Lauren, for those very, very, very kind words. My name is Matthew Teutimez. I am the tribal biologist for the Gabrieleño Mission Indians. I'm the son of John Teutimez, elder of the Gabrieleño Mission Indians, Kizh Nation. And I'm here joined with my cousin, Andrew Salas, our chairman of the Gabrieleño Mission Indians.
Nice to meet everybody.
Nice to see you, and thank you so much for being present in this strange way today.
Oh, I thank you. And again, my name is Andrew Salas. I'm the tribal chair of the Gabrieleño Kizh Indians of the area of Gabrieleño Mission Indians, as they know us today. I'm the son of Ernie Salas Teutimez. This is my father. This is my father, Ernie. He's our chief. He's our leader of our tribe, and he's still with us today. We're very, very pleased that he is.
God bless.
So we just wanted to start off the time together with a simple prayer that we utilize music as well as word as well.
So we'll start it off by calling on the great creator, the great spirit. Oh, great spirit, whose voice we hear in the winds and whose breath gives life to all. Hear us. We are some of your children. We are small and weak. We seek your strength and wisdom. Make my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunsets. Make my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make my hands respect the things that you have created. we seek your wisdom so that we may know all the lessons you have hidden beneath all the leaf and rocks. We call on you, Great Spirit. We need your strength, not to be superior to our brothers and sisters, but to be able to fight our greatest enemy, ourselves. Make us ever ready to come to you with clean hands and straight eye as life fades as the fading sun sets, so that our spirits could come to you without shame. Nawija, Aho, Wata, Tahahanuka. Aho. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredible offering of sound. I woke up this morning to the most incredible sound of breeze. It was the first sort of Santa Ana wind that I felt in a really long time. And being now more than 1 month in the primary forest of the Santa Monica Mountains, one experiences time in a completely different flow. And to be able to come in this virtual way today and hear a wind instrument usher us in, and a reminder through your beautiful words of benediction, Chairman Salas, that we're all interconnected and we're all in this together.
Right.
And it is in that spirit of child's mind that we're opening these interdependent salons, looking to tribal people as our guides to try and own the ways in which each of us have become separated from the life web and things that we know from your lessons already to us, Matt, that Gabrieleño people know from the moment they're born, like how a riparian plant like willow is associated with the divine feminine. It's taken me a long series of miles in my life, even along the LA River, to make that connection. So we're so thankful that you're here today. And we're so thankful that our enlarged community of people interested in finding out how you, from the position of your isolation right now, can feel as purposed and interdependent as you possibly can. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to now introduce my colleague, Millie Mason-Moore, who's going to host the body of the conversation with Chairman Andy Salas and Matt Teutimez about the ethnobotany, the medicine that can be found along the river, as a beginning conversation about what you can see around you in the life web if you're living in Los Angeles. Before we begin our conversation, John is going to put up a couple of maps so that you can see, for those of you who aren't necessarily schooled in looking below the cracks of the infrastructure of the LA River, what our region where we're talking about our plants is. So this is Metabolic Studio site and the portion of the LA River that we've been activating. And you can see it's at the foothills of what's known as Elysian Park, but used to be where many tribal villages were, because you would find medicine at the top of hills rather than necessarily at the bottom of that. Looking out just a little bit, you can see almost every road in Los Angeles ripping through what would have been the floodplain of the unbridled river. So it's quite hard to imagine how much agency is in that floodplain. And if you take a step further out here, you can start to see the foothills of the mountains around the area that we're working. And you can begin to imagine in your mind's eye that all of that which is built up and spoken for in contemporary real estate was the floodplain of a pre-colonized city. So that is the scale of agency that we're talking about today, and in building our citizens' utility with you, with all of you who are living in this region. This is the ecozone that we're trying to rethink. And I would say if we can do it here, we can do it anywhere. This is probably the least habitable place to consider growing food and medicine and resource sharing if you look at it like this. So I wanted to at least give you guys all the same framework for our conversation before I pass you over to Millie Mason-Moore for the body of this conversation. I'll interrupt at some point and we'll move to questions and answers. If you have questions, we will be unmuting you through my colleague Kizh, who will take as many questions as we have time for. And then we will close with a poem written and read by our colleague Yara. So over to you, Millie.
Thank you again, gentlemen, for joining us today and taking the time to speak to us today. We really want to learn more about your traditional knowledge, specifically with native species. So my first question to you both is, during this current pandemic crisis, how can we best engage and unify people together in building community as devoted caretakers of this land?
Well, that's it. What we have been, the way our elders teach us about the, what we call today natural resources of the land, is that these resources were considered gifts of our Creator. And as a gift, it needs to be respected and it needs to be used. And so what's happened is that there's been a displacement of our human connectivity to these gifts that have been a part of the human experience for thousands and thousands of years on this landscape until just the last few hundred years, even just the last few decades even. You know, we have stories of our family still utilizing the land up until the 40s, 50s. But once they started channelizing a lot of the water bodies, that's when a lot of the displacement, the separation, the removal of human activity with this very vast landscape that was only providing therapeutic medicinal compounds and just all of these elements that supported human life in this basin. And so by reintroducing ourselves or getting our communities back to understanding these gifts that were given to us, not just us native families, given to everybody who lives in this communal area. And so by our communities understanding these gifts that we were provided, that's what's going to help us value the gift and then not destroy the gift when we want a Starbucks or we want a Costco or we want new housing, because we are destroying these gifts left and right in terms of urbanization or what we like to call today as progress. And so with that, I mean, our ancient families, what we're experiencing right now in this pandemic is not unfamiliar to our families. This happened to our families back in the early 1800s, in the 1700s even, late 1700s, with the Spanish bringing in their diseases.
The smallpox epidemic and that was here also. And us, that's why we survived today. As I mentioned in the past, we survived today because we were taken to remote areas, lived on the ranchos for the prominent families like Don Los Feliz that had Elysian Park and all that area, Moana, that area, Los Nietos, because we are part of the Los Nietos family. That's my grandma's last name. We were taken to these remote areas, able to survive all the disease that was going on near the mission. And while we were living on these ranches, we were still utilizing traditional plants to keep our immune system going. So, even my grandfather, Ernie, later, after divorcing my grandmother, and after leaving as a young boy, he left Sherman Indian School as a young boy. Well, not 18 years old. He was released, and then he went over to a property his sister had in Mariloma, just about 2 blocks away from the Santa Ana River. There, when I was a young boy in the 70s, going with my grandfather, there was no market nearby. And believe it or not, people think he grew cactus in the back, he had rabbits, he had chickens, he had a farm. But when it was time to go get medicinal plants, we had 2 blocks to the river. To the river, we would go pick, and he would show us the plants that taste like licorice, plants that taste different, estofiote, mugwort, all these plants that were for our stomach pains or flus or whatever. He would gather them, keep them in a shed in the back, or replant them nearby near on his little ranch, and he would utilize them for his medicine. My grandpa, the only time he went to the doctor was during his ending, when he was already dying at the end of his days, where they put him into a hospital, and that's where he left. He passed in the hospital. But prior to that, everything was plants and teas, just like we drink today. Plants and teas. That's what all my girls, my father, everybody, and they're all doing well. They're eating, and their elderberry vitamins, and they're drinking their teas. And my dad just says, keep away, drink your teas, and you'll get through this.
Because here's the reality of what science is now starting to report on the usage of these native plants. And especially one of the very community-wide utilized herbal plant in California is cannabis. And a lot of the cannabis research is actually helping to now open up these truths that we always knew, and these are receptor sites. We already know that we have cannabinol or cannabinoid receptor sites already in our bodies, meaning when we are introduced with these compounds from the plant, our body already knows what to do with it. And that's a huge, what's that word? Evolutionary component that we're not recognizing. Our bodies are already set up to receive this medicine through these mechanisms that are through signals and receptor sites. And because of that, we're not utilizing any of that anymore. So these are compounds called monoterpenoids, flavonoids, sesquiterpenes, all of these compounds, which are heavily prevalent within our coastal sage scrub ecosystem, as well as within our chaparral, as well as within our riparian. We have a lot of these just very aromatic plants, and the aromas indicate to you the medicine. And so we are wasting all this available medicine that helps in identifying. And here's the crazy part about these medicines. We already have the receptor site set up, so that tells us that there's already a relationship that has occurred in our past human time here. So now our generations have those relationships already set up in our bodies. When we utilize these compounds, they help us in healing these ailments that we have, but they don't help with that certain ailment, such as some people say, oh, this compound helps with tuberculosis, or this plant helps with this. It's not that the plant was designed to help with that one specific ailment. The plant was designed to find the abnormal within the normal. And that's like, it's that Sesame Street song, one of these is not like the other. That's how our plants help us in our bodies. Here's the crazy thing. Number one, how do they even know what's normal? Well, they can decipher it. Now, here's one particular plant that we make our teas out of. This is Pluchia odorata. This plant, and I sent some science about it, so we'll post those up as well. But this plant has already been able to identify abnormal cells, what we call cancer cells, in our bodies. Because as you know, cancer cells are not a virus, they're not a bacteria, they're a miscommunication of our cells, so they're abnormal. Well, here's how Pluchia identifies in our body. There's already a mechanism that sets up. Pluchia has a high affinity towards cholesterol binding proteins. Oh, okay. Well, what does that mean? Well, check this out. Cancer cells, for whatever reason, on their cell membrane have a high concentration of cholesterol binding proteins. So through natural affinity, the Pluchia compounds are going to find these abnormal cells because they have way more cholesterol binding proteins than they should, and that's what's indicating them as abnormal and as cancer. So then Pluchia comes and identifies it through that mechanism, through that process. Once it identifies it, it then slows it down, because as we know, cancer cells, one of the problems is that they replicate and they make more and they make more. And that's one thing that causes the tumors and all this other, malgrowth kind of issues. Well, what this plant does is once it finds an abnormal cell, it says, okay, we got to figure out what's going on with this abnormality. So it puts a stop to everything. It seizes everything. How does it do it? All our cells have these microtubules, these little cytoskeleton components to it. And these microtubules, when you have mitosis, you have to actually break that microtubule in order to create another cell. So when that process happens, what this plant does is it stabilizes the microtubules so that now that cell will just stay solid and it's not going to progress. Then this plant goes even one more step further. When it's already identified the abnormal cell and then slowed it down to investigate, if it cannot be repaired, because our body has all these repair mechanisms set up in it. That's our immunity. That's what we need to be supporting during this time of this pandemic, is our immunity, because that's the system that's going to help us in this this whole game, this whole war that we're in. So when this these compounds from Pluchia ended up finding that, okay, this abnormal cell isn't able to be repaired, it then can program it into apoptosis, because cells need to be programmed to die. They don't just die by, slicing them or destroying them. You can break open the nucleus and that'll cause, but anyway, that's other type of factors, but you actually have to program them to now remove themselves. And these plants already have these tools and abilities, because you got to figure through evolution, through thousands of years, they've had to combat against viruses, against molds, against fungus, against bacteria, all of these micro kind of terror guys that are trying to get into those systems as well. They've had to combat it too. So all we're doing as humans is utilizing the systems that the plants have already set up, and we already have recognizable systems in us. The plants are like, hey, we're just here to help you guys. And that's the part that we're not recognizing today.
They're ignoring us. Yeah.
Yeah, we're ignoring their want to help us. And there's so many, and water, because water is life. Whenever you have a water environment, you're going to have a whole suite of plants that are going to be way medicinal for a lot of these ailments that we are dealing with today, and that is very recognizable today. So our families right now, we're doing steam treatments of estafillte, because estafillte has monoterpenoids such as camphor, such as menthol. These components work at the cellular level to be able to open up the bronchioles and allow this medicine that's able to kill viruses and kill bacteria. They're antiviral, they're antibacterial. That's part of their evolutionary process, that we are now taking those tools, those gifts of weaponry that we can now utilize in our bodies, because our bodies are not getting weapons anymore. We are so displaced from, nutritious foods that a lot of times, during these times, we have to eat packaged foods because that's what they're providing us in a lot of the components. So that sort of nutritional value, we're not up to the standards, because as my cousin was mentioning, the average age of all our families was in the hundreds because of their usage of the natural system that was here. We have so many components. Do you know our rivers used to carry a lot of our minerals from our mountains? That's the way it used to be set up. But because we channelize, that doesn't happen anymore. Do you know that we have a super brilliant green fluoride within our San Gabriel Mountains?
Wow.
This mineral, which we use in our waters today for, building up our teeth and for our immunity, we use fluoride today, but our fluoride in our local mountains illuminesces a color green. It usually illuminesces yellow. Standard fluoride illuminesces yellow, but ours illuminesces green, showing its uniqueness. And it's just capabilities of being therapeutic, because that's what used to go into our water systems, and that's what we would be drinking, are all these elements that we have to now supplement into our water today. But all these elements were natural here, and they were all part. And it's still happening. These cycles are trying to happen, but we mute them so much. That's why in these last couple months that we have muted our activities, our human activities, look how the earth is reacting.
Mining them and
I mean, you're seeing just this abound of healing that the earth can do in this short amount of time. Well, it can do that to our bodies too. And that's what it's wanting to do. That's what it was put here for. That's what the Creator provided it to us for, is for that element.
Thank you. Thank you for that in-depth, informative conversation, because it's really important for our audience to learn more about these native species. Many of us are growing them in our backyards, and we want to learn how to use them properly at home. I currently have some white sage and some Cleveland sage because it's so aromatic and it calms me down. Yeah, so now that I have the white sage and the Cleveland sage, I know you mentioned Pluchia, which is the fleabane marsh, correct? As a common marsh fleabane, pardon me. And let's talk a little bit about Estafiate mugwort, which you already did, so let's skip that one. How about willow and elderberry?
Oh boy.
Tell us a little bit about how that's beneficial during this COVID epidemic that we're currently going through, and possibly maybe you can give us some recipes on how to use them.
Actually, what you have right now, I'll get on to willow as well, because I don't want to leave that beautiful plant out. But what you have right now, the white sage, I actually provided a scientific literature. There just came out some literature regarding when you smudge or when you burn the sage. The sage, what they found is that by smudging your home, sage will actually remove and kill more black mold or more bacteria and mold within our walls than our commercial products at Home Depot and all the other places. So it's an antiviral. So what they found is that by smudging, you are actually clearing or cleansing a room. So if you have a COVID-19 positive patient or a family member in a room, actually by smudging the other rooms and even potentially that room, you are removing the aerial viral components that are in that room. That is what is infecting us, is the aerial components.
Excuse me, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm making bundles, for my family, anybody that wants them, but I'm making bundles of sage. So those that feel they have those symptoms, or I just tell them, pass it on, let them burn it in their home and smudge the room or wherever they're confined to kill that virus. It works.
Right. You can read the literature about it, but that's the same way with Estafiate, with mugwort. But we utilize, and you can do that same with the white sage. Yes, you boil it. You get a bowl of water. You don't boil the plant. Don't boil the plant with the water. You boil the water first, so that now you have a bowl of boiling water. Then you introduce the plant. Because once you introduce that plant, it's going to now send off all of these fragrances that's your medicine. So you don't want to waste it when you're cooking it.
You don't want to waste it while you're boiling it at the same time. Let it boil, then throw the plant in there, and then grab a towel, put it over your head, and you'll feel that medicine going in your system.
I mean, the heat, number one, is another, bronchodilator. It'll help relax your bronchioles. And then the medicine gets into all those little crevices, all through the alveoli, all those small tubes that we have in our lungs. And that's where, all these little viruses and even bacteria, tuberculosis, things of that sort, that's where they hide. And so these plants have already proven themselves. When the Spanish got here, they had a whole slew of tuberculosis that they had to do, and they utilized one of our plants called Yerba Santa, Areodictyon crassifolium. That plant in itself. So all of these have that capacity of all you got to do is do a steam treatment. Because we used to, our baths every day were within a steam hut, an underground little hut. And so you'd have water down there, you'd cook that up, and then you'd introduce these plants. So that was part of your standard shower. every day or bath every day, back in the day because you had that available. Well, we can do a similar thing. And seriously, it feels like a spa day when you do this because the fragrances that come out of it are very they open up all your nasal passages, they just help in that element. And so they're not here to cure, they're here to help. And so a lot of folks look at these like, oh, this will cure what I have. No, they're here to boost your immune system. So your immune system then cures it out of your body or gets it out of your body. These guys are helpers. And that's the one thing that a lot of folks just will do it one time and think that, like pills sometimes, we can just take one pill and it eliminates. Not our plants. Our plants want to hold your hand and they want to spend some time with you. They want to hang out with you for a few days. So with these treatments, you got to do it over a span of time. And that's one thing with our, herbal treatments is it's not just a one and done kind of, scenario. You got to have a relationship with them. So that's why growing them at your house and understanding their growth patterns and then picking them right at their prime time. Because as I don't know if I was explaining in this conversation, but the time you want to pick plants is when they're putting their energy into that form. So if they're leafing out, you want to pick those new shoots because those have the most compounds or the most sugars, just the energy that's part of the plant in that component. If you want seeds, you got to wait for that part. You want the flowers, you got to wait for that part. So it's all in understanding the plants. And I thank you so much, Millie, for identifying that people are growing them at their home. Because one thing that we do kind of ward against is going and foraging from out in the LA basin. The primary reason is just the toxicity that's within our basin and within our areas, within our roadways. I mean, there is so much toxins, and a lot of our plants, they're great uptakers of materials. And that's why a lot of them are cleansers of area. But if you were to pick a plant that's uptaking lead or uptaking mercury or anything that's being, drawn in by the gutters, by all of our streets, you are now introducing that into your body. So you don't want to do that. So that's why we will take that plant and grow it at our own home and then utilize, because we can control the soil in that scenario. But also the wildlife needs the plants. Just a quick real story, going back to the Sambucus that you were referring to, that's the elderberry, Sambucus nigra, that's used to be called Mexican elderberry. I think it's called blue elderberry now, but anyway, this plant in itself is super valuable right now. It is our flu cure, or flu preventer, I should say. It actually can cure as well because it actually will attack the virus through multiple compounds. However, us as humans, we can get great benefits from it, but the animals need to benefit from it as well. And here's a quick story. I did my master's thesis on our local coastal cactus wren. And this is a bird that only lives in cactus. And it utilizes that sort of habitat. And in that habitat also grows elderberry. And we would notice that in these habitats, elderberry was always present. They used it as a perch and everything of that sort. Well, my professor explained to me that it was a necessary component because cactus wren are insect eaters.
Oh, wow.
And when they have their little babies, these 1 day, 2 day, 3 day old little nestlings, they cannot eat insects. So because of the chitin that's within the exoskeleton of the insect, they can't digest it. So the parents have to feed them something else that has proteins and sugars and things of that sort. So what do they feed them? They feed them the berries of the elderberry, the berries of the gooseberry, all these different plant foods that are present at that time that the birds need for the first few days of the nestling's life. Then once the nestling gets about age 5, age 6, it can now metabolize that chitin that's within the exoskeleton. So that's why we also, say don't go out and forage, because you may be taking berries from a plant that is necessary for, a cactus wren or even for a wren, any insect eating bird. Even a lot of our flycatchers are the one you should see around your house right now is the black phoebe. Those are always, around our houses right now. They should be nesting right now. So these guys, they need other fruits during that time. So long story longer.
We appreciate all the stories, really. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What other plants can you tell us that will help with our current situation? I mean, specifically immunity.
Right. So You want to?
Elderberry. Go ahead.
Yeah, the elderberry. That's one bad boy. That, oh my goodness, the capacity of that. We had 5 words for that one plant.
Wow.
All the other plants just were called, that's lemonade berry, or that's chamise, or that's, that's the common words today. But for this one, they had a word for the flowers, that, a separate word, a word for the actual berries, a word for when it's young, and a word for the tea that was made from it, because this plant provided unbelievable amount of community building, immunity, just robust kind of compounds. And that's one component. So here's the thing with elderberry. All the community, when elderberry would fruit, it fruits a lot. As you can see in that picture, all those were flowers. And that's actually out in Chino Hills. I took that picture when I was doing some surveys out there. And that's out in the Chino Hills area. And this is the capacity of what one elderberry plant can provide to the community.
Yeah.
And so with this, when you pick those elderberries, if you pick them young, they have certain components to them when they're green. And they actually have a toxic component to them. But then when you allow them to ripen, that toxicity lessens and the sugars increase. And then it becomes where you can pick it right off the tree and eat it. But in most parts, you do have to cook it to remove some of those bit of toxins that are within it. And then what you get is you get compounds such as there's one called cyanin 3. Oh my goodness, what was the name of it? But it's a compound that's been shown to actually find the flu virus in our bodies and kill it. So, and it works not so much when you first start getting these symptoms. It works when you already are. So it's pretty much your special forces. When you are at a war and you need to isolate and kill certain sections, that's what this does. It doesn't just come and kind of do a, beforehand. A lot of our sages do the beforehand stuff where they prepare you. But then this elderberry, it's the when you're attacked, when you're under attack, that's what the elderberry comes in and starts just decimating the viruses. And that's what's already been proven. I provided a bunch of different academic articles, even from 2019, I think was the most recent, indicating these combative values that these plants are providing to our body during this time.
Most recent, my daughters, they call me, they said, Dad, we're on Twitter, is that what they call it, Twitter? I don't have any of that Twitter. I go, Dad, there was a young lady on Twitter, and she was talking to the community, or she put something out, and she said that she had these symptoms, or she had COVID-19, and she was really sick with the fever, and they were giving her medications, and then no one wanted to really give her or test her for COVID-19. So, but she was getting sick, and she felt those symptoms, and then someone turned her on to elderberry.
Oh, wow.
She got elderberry, and she did steam treatments, just with regular steam though, with no plant. But she said 3 days after the elderberry, 3 days, she's a movie star. I think she's a star that was recent. I can get the girls to give me her name right now. But she was one of the, she's a star that had the virus, and she started using, you know who she was? Nicole Simpson's sister. Nicole Simpson, the O.J. Simpson.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. Her sister is that had that. You can look her up, and she used elderberry, and she's better now. It works. I mean, in my household, in my mom's, I'm the doctor of the family. I don't know all the plants and that, like Dad and Matt, by their names and their science names. I just know which one to pick and which one to use when my family's sick. They got an earache, they got a stomach ache, or the girls are on that time of the month and they're with their pains. I get estelfiote, I boil it, I drop a little spoon of honey in it, and here, drink it. In 5 minutes, that pain's gone immediately. No Tylenol, no Aleve, or just that tea. I go to the backyard, take some clippings, and I boil. Matt can tell you, that's where my neighbors call me and say, hey, Andy, do you think I can get a little clipping? I introduce them to the plant. The plant's there for them. That's my little community, is where I live, is my little community. and I'm the doctor of the neighborhood, according to them, and the mayor.
And that's what we want to provide for other communities, is this educational source where all communities can have, just like you have a community garden with food, this is food. Our land was a garden. That's why farming was not done here, because the land pretty much farmed itself. It provided itself. And here's the main concept shift that our family has always done, but our community does not do, is the dependence component. Our family's dependence was always on the creator, for what the creator provided for your food, for your medicine, for your shelter. It was all provided by the earth. But now our dependence has shifted to man. All our food is provided by man. All our medicine is provided by man. All of our shelter now is provided by man. And we look at the inadequacies of what man can provide. That's why everyone's hoarding toilet paper. Yeah. When we can, Sycamore is a great toilet paper, especially right now with the new growth. It's velvety, it's soft, it's big, it covers your, anyway. And then we also have Dock. There's a whole other plant along the river that's a velvety plant. Anyway, so it's this dependency component that our family would rather depend on the products of our creator and utilize those compounds that he's providing, he's gifting us on this earth. We would rather utilize those gifts than what we're depending on now, waiting for some sort of, medicine coming out from man. Where right now, during this time, the creator wants to support you through his creation of this Mother Earth. Yeah. And that's the component that is wanting to support our whole community and can support our whole community, but we're not allowing it. We're not, giving it love to be able to provide these gifts for us.
We're not in panic mode. When we found that this hit, this ain't our first rodeo. Right. We know where to look and what to utilize to keep us very healthy.
Exactly.
We do get the flus, we do get sick, and when we get those symptoms, we utilize these plants. But we do not go into panic mode. My kids, they don't, I just tell them watch themselves where they go and whatever. But we do not panic because we know what to do, what the plan is. When something like this, a virus hits, we gather, okay, we're going to take this for this. If you come to my house, you're going to see everything I have lined up. Each night, everybody takes a little drink, or at least twice a week, just to keep the immune up. Yep. That's all it is. And everybody's good. My kids still go running, jogging. They're all fit. They don't look like daddy, but they're all fit and they keep in shape, and they use those natural resources that we for thousands of years have been using.
And that's what I was getting to, another point of the community resistance component. By all of our communities utilizing these compounds, this is what they did back in the day. When elderberry would be fruiting, everyone would be collecting it, and that would be the meals for everyone for those, first, those weeks of when it was fruiting. So if we all were eating elderberry, which we make jellies out of it, or syrups or things of that sort, if all our community was able to eat that before next winter, because in August and in July, August, that's when we're going to be fruiting. That's when we can pick. We can pick it, prepare ourselves so that everyone is having some sort of, source during the winter time. That's when we eat elderberry, is during the time when, the flu is around.
On jelly, Matt makes jelly.
It's a very
and
good.
On toast, just like that with coffee.
You guys are making me hungry.
Yeah.
But,
One last question, because we're running a bit out of time. This conversation is so interesting. Thank you again. But just because we really want to learn, you guys talked a little bit about Aleve and Tylenol. Where does our aspirin come from?
Thank you for bringing that up. So, willow. Willow is one of our main favorite guys, because willow actually allowed it, or where can you see? Our name Kizh, I don't know if you can see it, is named after the dome huts, the Thule and reed huts that were made. And that dome structure is the strongest geometric structure that can be created. And willow allowed us to create that, because willow being, as Lauren was mentioning in early on, the identity of our women, the symbol for our women, because willow bends but never breaks. And that's still the tenacity, the strength within our family today of our women. We depend on, obviously, that's just how it is. And so willow was that component that would form this very strong geographic form. However, willow not only provided all these structural benefits to us, they also provided insecticide benefits where it would keep insects out of your home. And then it would also provide us medicinal benefits. And that's where leading into the, where aspirin came from. If you look at a bottle of aspirin, look at the active compound, it'll say acetyl salicylic acid. This is what happens with willow when we take it. And here's another example of how willow, because our chief, Andy's dad, the way he teaches us is that the plants and animals, they were actually created before humans. In our origin story, the plants and animals were created first. Therefore, there are elders. Therefore, they're meant to be learned from. They're meant to teach us. So here's one lesson that willow teaches us during this capacity of getting medicine from that plant. And I have other examples too, but we'll just speak about the willow right now. With the willow, the main compound in it is salicin, S-A-L-I-C-I-N. Salicin is not recognizable by the human body. Salicin is actually recognizable by a foreign critter that is living in our body. And a lot of people are like, what? There's something living in me? What? Yeah, this is something that all the yogurt industry is trying to sell us left and right. These are the probiotics, the beneficial bacteria within our gut. Well, these probiotics, you know, one of their main purposes is to extract out these compounds and repackage them in a way that our body can recognize. So this is what's happening with willow, is they're taking the salicin. Our body says, oh, I don't know what to do with that. But the probiotic says, hey, I know what that is. It pulls it out. It repackages it into salicylanin. Salicylanin then is recognizable by our body. That then gets oxidized within our liver and gets repackaged into salicylic acid, which is the active compound within aspirin. They just use acetyl because that's a more tender for our belly. A lot of people, you know, would throw up with salicylic acid.
Thank you so much, Matt. And
willow.
I have the unfortunate role of stopping your flow right now because I could listen to you guys forever. And thank you so much for stimulating us to think about how we can regain our interdependence with living systems and use this moment of pause to rethink our strategy about where we live, how we live, and under what terms. And we hope this is the beginning of many conversations where you will come on to our salon and teach us different aspects of what you know. But for right now, I'm going to turn over to my colleague Kizh and unmute certain people so they can ask you themselves some of their questions.
Lauren, real quick, I want to say that's why the Gabrieleño, the Kizh here, all other tribes depended on them because of the resources we had here. We were rich, not with money, but with resources, and we helped self-sustain those other tribes, sister tribes, all the way to the Mojaves, all the way to New Mexico. It was because of us.
Thank you. All right, let's take our first question, Kizh.
Sure, thank you. So firstly, I'm actually just gonna read a couple quick clarifying questions about sage because we were getting a few from the Instagram Live. So thanks to everyone who's tuning in on Instagram. So can you steam the sage instead of burning it to cleanse the rooms? And do you have, and a second question, relatedly, do you have to dry the sage first?
So steaming, so you're getting different compounds. When you add heat to something, when you burn something, the compounds that are coming off are going to be different than when you steam something. So the smudging component, the burning component, I don't recommend inhaling that as your medicinal component for that, for your respiratory. I recommend that for room kind of stuff. But when you're wanting for respiratory, steaming of that same sage, of white sage, of estofiote, steaming of those sages is the preferred through water. But you're mainly getting terpenes in that steaming. Water, because as you know, not everything is soluble into everything. Oil and water, you know, so the terpenes, they actually do come in with the water, but there's other components that you would get with the smudging, with the burning, that you're not going to get with the water. So
dried sage, do not inhale clippings straight from the sage itself. clip them,
Right.
boil water, throw them in the pot there,
Fresh sage.
fresh, and then steam. That's the way you want to do
Right.
that. Don't get the dry sage
Right.
and inhale that. That's no.
No, that's only for out, and don't use dried sage in your water steam as well. It's best with fresh.
Fresh.
That's always just the preferred. But if all you can do is dried, I don't know how the efficacy of what you're actually going to be taking in. I hope that answers.
Awesome, thank you so much. So Plant Intelligence Agency, I'm going to unmute you shortly. You asked two good questions, one about spreading awareness while simultaneously protecting, as well as a possibility of learning more from Matt and Andy and other community members. So I'm gonna unmute you right now.
Hi, sorry I don't have the camera on. I don't have.
No worries, hello.
He's on
Okay.
mute.
Sorry, yep, now you should be unmuted.
Okay, hi. Sorry that I don't have my camera on. I was wondering about spreading awareness of these plants and making sure that they still stay protected and that, you know, people learn the value of them without over harvesting them.
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's why our main, I guess, focus is that help people grow these in their own yard. You know, the water company will give you a rebate on having drought tolerant landscaping in your own front yard. So more utilizing these plants as a garden aspect in your own yard than foraging, because foraging, as we were saying, you can't trust the toxins out there, and they need to continue out in nature because there's cycles that are going on that when we remove them during certain times of the year, we're disrupting those cycles. And you know, there's when you're especially, and here's one main thing, when folks go out, and we get this a lot, we have some friends, yeah, from the fire department who they will provide us with a bunch of white sage that has been cut by these people who go out into Cucamonga, go out into all these foothill lands and just cut the sage, and they end up ruining the sage because they're cutting, and we all should know about this, apical meristems. You do not want to cut the apical meristems when you're out foraging. Actually, you shouldn't be foraging anyway. The apical meristem, that's the top part of the plant that's growing, that's going to create more leafage, more, you know, biomass from the plant. And all these guys end up going out there, they cut the apical, and they don't have any, you know, tertiary ones or any meristems that are down lower. So the plant ends up dying off, or it ends up just having this huge like scar on it. So it's these components that, yes, we stress, do not go out into nature and forage these things because nature needs those things to happen. However, we do want to be part of public lands in trimming out there and actually maintaining the guarding out there. And that's the component that can be utilized for education. We're at these, you know, state park areas that they need to reduce the fuel loads that are out there on our lands. That's why we're having all these huge fires, because when we create conservation lands, we put it out there and then we put a fence around there and put a few trails through and say, okay, people, you can't do anything to it. All you got to do is walk through it and look at it. But we're not using it. And that's the missing factor, and you know, us being part of the whole equation, that's the missing factor as well. But when we are able to utilize the components, if we can go in there and be able to do some thinning of this material and then use that thin material that needs to be removed so that the fuel load gets lessened, that thinning material can be made into these medicines, can be made into products that LA can support and be providing to the whole world community. So this is something that we're already having to do operations and maintenance on our state park lands, but all of this material ends up getting thrown away into our landfills. So our tribe has worked with different organizations to get that material, have them give it to us, and pretty much we're making medicine out of their garbage. And
wow.
One effort that we're trying to push within our state to say, hey, all tribes can do this. We're working with a tribe down in San Diego where they're providing us with their elderberries. And in so doing, we're trying to provide them with other elements of how they can utilize their land to create these products, mainly for their elders. And that's why we do it, mainly for our families as well. But we want to expand this because of what's going on right now with the pandemic. We see a world need, at least our LA region need, you know, for being able to combat these little microbes that are going to be coming into our communities. It's not just this one we're going to be dealing with.
You know, we take walks up to the hillside to check on some of the medicinal plants that we know are there. And we find duffel bags that are just thrown on the corner there of individuals that go up there and clip, and maybe they see the police and they leave the bag there and they take off, and it all goes to waste.
Right. Yep.
Just bundles of look like if they were trying to what do you call it,
Like,
transplant marijuana, big bags, bundles of sage, just to make $1 off of, $2 off of, destroyed. And they're destroying that right now up there in the Cucamonga area. You could go and drive by there, you see guys hopping in the sage area, hiding from anybody that patrols up there. When we go to patrol, we do our own patrolling because we protect our resources. Whether the government allows us to or not, we do go up there. And if we see anybody doing wrong, we shoo them away, get them out of there, because those are important resources for not only us, but for all of us. So that's why we do that.
Thanks. And how do we stay in touch and keep learning from you?
So we have our website, www.gabrieleñoindians.org, O-R-G, which I have a compendium that I've created that was on another website, but we've switched it over to this one. And I don't think it's been put onto this one, but that one, it will have some of this scientific information, because pretty much I was one of the lucky ones in our family to go to college. And so I got my master's in biology, but my uncle, Andy's dad, he taught me the tradition and taught me all the family ways of finding plants. Because when we look for plants, we smell them. We don't identify them visually. We identify them with their fragrance, because all our plants are very fragrant. And some of them look too much similar to each other. So you can take two leaves and like, oh, these are the same leaf. But then when you smell them, like for instance, Salvia leucophylla and Salvia mellifera, black sage and purple sage, a lot of times those leaf shapes will be very similar to each other. Their coloring may be different, but the leaf shape. And so if you just have anyway, side thing, but that component, we're going to try and push all that information out onto our website. But we're also, available for,
Metabolic?
through Metabolic, we can provide educational events through this platform, or when we can all get together so we can actually show you how we make stuff still, how we're actually utilizing, because this stuff wasn't just for Indians of yesteryear. This is for our community today, all these compounds and these components. And oh my goodness, the fun stuff we could still be doing with it, but we got to do it wisely. That's the whole thing. It's the stewardship component that we are wanting to lead, because here's the one thing is that our tribe has been dismissed and marginalized since the coming of the Europeans. And so especially now during this time of our government, we're thought of as just dumb Indians, just folks that are here for a handout. But that's not how it is. We have oral history, oral truth within our families that show this traditional ecological knowledge. And that's the main key word you got to hit on, traditional ecological knowledge. That's something that only comes from the tribes of California. And a lot of that ecological knowledge is being just left to the wayside because tribes aren't included in a lot of these planning processes that are a part. So that's why we urge to have tribes included all throughout California. We actually sit on the Tribal Advisory Council for the California's EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And so we do speak with the directors of the boards, departments, and organizations. And we see that they need this information from tribes. So that's why we're so grateful for Metabolic Studios to kind of lead the charge and saying, hey guys, these tribes have a bunch of information that we can utilize for our communities today, that we can all start re-engaging back with these gifts, with this Mother Earth that we are all living on and sharing together. Right. And it's this togetherness that we can do this together and reestablish these gifts and these benefits from our land. We can do that in our urbanized society.
So
I'm going
to interrupt you again and say it is my great privilege to be your pupil and your partner in figuring out how we can continue to communicate with our group here and whoever else wants to learn about sourcing native intelligence and native plants so that we can become more reconnected with the commons and
Right.
do it in a respectful way through your stewardship and your guidance. And to also say that we will be doing this starting right away. So the Metabolic Studio is growing these plants that part of all of which Matt talked about today. And we are going to be needing a lot of help to harvest, dry, make teas and medicine. And we're looking for all of you out there who would like to participate to let us know through our website, information at metabolicstudio.org, that you're interested, so that we can think about using the Postal Service to deliver things to you, so that we support the US Postal Service, and also form a utility by which we can learn to communicate what living in a non-capitalist exchange economy for our health and well-being looks like. So that's what's in front of us, and that's why we were so thankful to begin our conversation with the two of you. So thank you so much. Our next conversation next Thursday will be about radical mycology, with a focus on the industrial corridor of Los Angeles and the floodplain of the Gabrieleño, and what we can do with mushrooms to create the healthiest watershed and landshed, so that native seeds have the healthiest place to take root, and how you can do that without owning property. So we'll be going through that next week. Our special guest will be radical ecologist James Oliver, and he will be interviewed by our colleague here on the screen, Diego, who's been doing all the brilliant notes, and the conversation will be moderated by Derainer. So please come back next week, and we will close. It'll be same time, same place. We will close with an original poem by one of the Farm Lab team, Yara Herarte.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay. Thank you for that. Wow, that was so empowering. So much wonderful information, and thank you so much. Okay, well, here I go. Sojourning across the 10,000 emerald green hues of lamina in every leaf, there are rhythms rooting within the earth, teeming with microbial mycorrhiza, insects, and heard through the chorus of birds as our daily feathered prophets. Forever on with the infinite blue of the sky, every day holds its arms luminously wide open. Every day is a poem for the heart, endless harmonies for the heartstrings created by the eternal stirrings of the earth. If one allows himself to closely observe and focus on listening to the natural world, they will understand what is meant by these overly flowery sentiments. Whole passages of sacred scriptures and traced along the mapping veins of leaves, tasted within the nectary glands of flora and illuminated by the sunshine-filled splendor with each step taken forward. Poetic masterpieces, symphonic orchestrations, revelatory inspiration, and overall sustenance in life is all around us, just like magic. Thank you.
So beautiful, Yara. Our pollinator wave. So everybody, all of this Zoom information will be available to you each week, both on our website and on YouTube under Metabolic Studio. We will also be adding an edited version of the chat bar with all of the resources that have been listed, so that you have all those resources available. And again, we invite you now to what will be a weekly discussion about our interdependence with the life web and one another in this world where none of us can be anything but inspired generalists. It's all new for all of us. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week for Interdependence Salon #2.
Thank you.
I agree, sweetheart. And it's also not even intelligent, because it's like, if you think of like